Hi, I'm Hormazd Sorabjee. I'm the editor of Autocar India, and today we're going to be chatting about a topic that's very close to our hearts. It's about electric mobility, EVs, because in this age where environment is really a burning topic, we need sustainable mobility, something that's good for the environment. And talking to me about this is Sandeep Bangia, who is the head of Tata Power's EV, home automation, and ESCO business. Sandeep's going to be sharing with us Tata Power's plans in kind of proliferating the EV space with charging network. Sandeep, thanks so much for talking to us, and straight over to you. Charging infrastructure has been one of those big bottlenecks or really worries, which really has limited the kind of proliferation of EVs. So, just to understand from your point of view, where are we now? What is the roadmap? And is there some exciting plans afoot? Because clearly in India, the infrastructure is right now well behind the curve of other markets.
So, hi, Hormazd. It's always good to talk to you about anything to do with automotive and mobility. Thank you so much for having me on this show. Um, Tata Power, as you're aware, is a 100-year-old power utility. We are in the business of generation, transmission, distribution. So, this was a very logical extension of anything to do with power, and here we are. We started about a year or plus back when we set up our first charging station in Mumbai, and now we have close to about 400 charging stations, of which about 200 odd are the ones which is suitable for the Jaguar I-Pace, the CCS variety. And we are very happy and to welcome I-Pace and other EVs into the market with uh, big plans for extending this to say about 2,500 to 3,000 in the coming year, and about 100,000 public chargers in the next 5 years odd. I think that's where the big game lies.
Right. Obviously, the iPace is coming in and you are setting up a charging network for that. But before we get into that, just on the charging network, the sense one gets is it's really confined to cities as well. Now, when you have a car like an iPace, you really want to take it out of town. And, I'm sitting in Mahabaleshwar right now. It would be ideal to drive an EV here. I had struggled to get here over New Year in an EV. It wasn't practical. So just, beyond the cities, a fast charging network, what is the capacity of that network? Is 50 kilowatt hours enough? Are you looking at more? In Europe now with the Ionity, there's even up to 350. So just to get a kind of a roadmap that, yes, we know that, cities, it's fine, but this is very practical for cities. But it's when you move out of the cities that really the challenges are huge.
Right. So almost you hit the nail here. Within the city, there is not normally a challenge because for most of the cars, there is also home charging attached. Just like if you were to buy an iPace, we have a deal in which every customer of iPace will be installed a home charger, which is like your personal private petrol pump. But as you correctly mentioned, the fast charging network is very important for when you travel intercity or maybe for emergencies. So this is where we are making a difference. We are currently in about 45 to 50 cities currently, and we are expanding very very fast into the highways. And we have identified very specific key pair locations, highway pairs. Just to give you an example, if you were to drive between Mumbai and Mahabaleshwar, we would have chargers, and we have chargers at Lonavala, at Khalapur, at Talegaon, at Pune, at Vai, just Satara. So we are specifically mapping out highways which are along the Kashmir to Kanyakumari, as well as the entire Golden Quadrilateral, some specific highway routes, which is Mumbai, Ahmedabad, let's say, or Delhi, Chandigarh. So we are mapping those, and those are the places where the charges are now coming up. So you are absolutely right, and we are well on the ball for making this happen for you.
And what is the capacity of the chargers? I mean, is it going to be 50 kilowatt hours? Because that's is a 50 kilowatt. Because clearly, that also makes a difference because people don't like to stop for too long. But again, the cost, the infra, the whole, to have a really high capacity or high power DC charging network is costly, I'm sure. So I'm sure there are a lot of, these factors which come into play.
Sure. So right now we are setting up a combination of 25 and 50, 25 for the city, and mainly for highways we are setting up for 50. That's largely because the cars that are there in India are very, very comfortably able to take 50. Of course, there is a cost involved in 150 and up to 300. We have seen charges from other operators worldwide, but we believe that this may not be required at the current stage for two reasons. Number one is the cost of the infrastructure is very high, which obviously in some manner or the other gets transferred to the customer. And the second point is uh, we are trying to put up the chargers at logical pit stops. So if I were to just give you the similar example, you go from Mumbai to Ahmedabad, you wouldn't drive direct non-stop. So wherever you would want to stop for a bio break, for a coffee, for a samosa, or you are done in about 20 minutes is what you would take for a logical stop, and 20 minutes is what you would take for a car to get fully charged up on a 50 kilowatt charger as well. But having said that, we are watching this space very, very carefully when it comes to the future of charging. We are also working with charging manufacturers worldwide to try and get those chargers of 150 kilowatt induction charging, which is sort of connectless charging, contactless charging. So we are working with some of those to evangelize this ecosystem, and whenever this ecosystem is ready, I think we will be the first ones to get you on board.
Are there any specific solutions you're providing for the iPace other than just the the wall box charger? Is it going to be? Are you installing? Let's say, obviously there will be charging at the showrooms as well. But are you going to be having dedicated charging at malls, housing complexes, office complexes, and that sort of thing?
Sure. So for any customer of iPace, to begin with, we have the tie-up with to ensure that the customer's car, before it gets delivered, the charger is there at his installed at his residence. I think that is something which is the starting point. Uh, then the logical motion points were for the customer at his workplace, at the malls, at the supermarkets, at highway locations, at public parking spaces like railway stations or even the MCGM parking spots or the city authority parking spots. So those are the kind of places that we are putting up, which would be logical pit stops or logical stops for any vehicle to. We would be definitely looking at people who are who are buying iPace, uh, and this is what we have been doing for other cars as well. Uh, we go to their offices to check whether we can install chargers at their offices, and they would possibly help us out in trying to find a location. So this is where we are trying to cover the entire spectrum from home to a highway location. In between everything, malls, supermarket, cinemas, auditoriums, and the public parking spaces. We are identifying all of those locations.
Right. And, just looking at the EV market in India and the fact that it is gaining traction, of course, it's a very small base, but from what I understand, there could be a sale of 10,000 EVs in 2021. Obviously, it's growing. It's a small base, but I just want to understand, what are the growth drivers? I would imagine one of them is the skyrocketing fuel prices, which I don't think we're going to see any signs of, coming down. That could be one. But are you finding that there's more and more confidence in EVs and the whole issues of range anxiety, where you will charge, and what's really going to be driving that growth in the future?
So I think there are about three, or if I can hazard, four key drivers. I'm not going to talk about pollution, which is very clearly the requirement for a country like ours. We are host to seven out of the top 10 most polluted cities in the country. That's obviously going to be a driver. People are looking at sustainable options. Uh, the second option is the choice. The second consideration is the choice. So today you have got about 3 or 4 cars. With cars like iPace coming in, I think this is going to increase the range and variety of the choices that are available to a customer. And with something like an iPace, this is absolutely cutting edge, award winning car. I think the interest in EVs is very, very high. This is the second discussion. The third one I would say is the cost. With the volumes in the country for EVs going up, as well as the battery technologies that are being worked upon, there are various battery chemistries that have been worked upon, some in India, some abroad. So that will bring down the cost of the vehicle, and that should spur the ecosystem big time. And the fourth one was, I would say, is in a way COVID. Honestly, COVID has helped the cause of the electric vehicle very simply because uh, you don't get to see an air quality index of about 30 to 40 ever. I have not seen it in the past. I may not possibly see it in the future. The only way you can get it is when you just eliminate the tailpipe emissions, and
Right.
the
With the
crux
lockdown, that's
of
what happened. Yeah.
that's exactly what happened, and that increased the narrative around sustainability. So I'm very glad that senior journalists like you are also talking about electric vehicles, and it has become a part of a national narrative. It has become a part of living room conversations, and this is exactly what is going to spur the ecosystem. It's only a matter of time. That's about it.
Just talking about the entire ecosystem, but on one side, while the tailpipe emissions were lowered in the lockdown and not there, and definitely at a street level, the toxicity of the air and the AQI is better. But, looking at overall from a CO2 perspective, again, you have to move to non-renewable, you have to move to renewable sources for that. And currently, our non-renewable sources, fundamentally coal, and thermal, 60 to 65%. So, what is your focus on renewable sources? And clearly, there is a cost to that, because finally, that really would complete the loop.
Sure, I think you're absolutely spot on. Uh, I mean, there are two parts to this. So the first one being uh, the greening of the grid in the country, and then I'm going to just tell you something about what we are doing as Tata Power. Very simply, you are absolutely right by saying that 60-65% of the power is through coal or non-clean sources. This proportion is changing very, very fast.
There's a cost to that, isn't it? It's expensive, because let's face it, why everyone, even developed countries, still stick to thermal is just because of the cost factor, isn't it?
So you'll be seeing the kind of bids that are happening on the renewable space. Renewable, which is mainly solar, the prices are dropping very sharply. They're dropping very, very sharply, and also that is also to do with the demand as well as the volume again. So there is two parts to this. One is it's an intent to doing it. There is a government policy push towards making the grid greener, as well as there is a very clear responsibility angle to it. And we are looking at both. Tata Power as a company, sustainability is something we have made announcements very clearly that by 2050 we will be a zero carbon company. I think that speaks a lot of that speaks of volumes about the commitment to sustainability that Tata Power as a company, and of course supported by the overall grid within in the ambit of the public policy is something that we are very clearly evangelizing or catalyzing to make it happen. Of course, there is a cost to that, but I think some things that have to be done, and we are very clearly approaching that direction.
Right. And, just going forward on, let's say the future of charging, how important are, going to be the smaller grids, micro and nano grids? And, are there any other challenges or nuances, setting up the charging infra? I mean, clearly, people have to have access to a plug, easy access to a plug, whether it's at home, at the office. That in itself is a challenge. So, where do you see this, how do you see the future of charging, and how do you see it really panning out in our market?
Right. So before I just specifically talk about the future of charging, I think it's just taking about 30 seconds to talk about what comprises charging. So charging very clearly comprises of three components: the charger itself, which is the hardware, which is the device; uh,
Right.
the expertise which sits behind the charger, which is the grid management, the grid expertise. This is the second part. And the third part, I would call it sitting on top of the charger, which is a digital platform that enables what you're doing. So, a future of charging is completely, I would say, focused on all of these three things. On the charger piece, hardware piece, very clearly, the kind of charger that we are trying to bring in, whether you mentioned about 150 kilowatt charger, 350 kilowatt charger, those are the kind of emerging requirements that are coming through. On the hardware piece, there is very clearly movement towards induction charging. So you just have a plate at the bottom, the car just goes on top, and the car just gets charged. It's no connection, no nothing. You just seamlessly, it's done. Now, there's a lot of work happening in this direction. We are working with some startups, so to speak, in this direction. But having said that, this is the charging hardware. Coming behind on the charging infrastructure side, which is where some of the challenges which are there in the minds of people more than of people like us. Having said that, the expertise on the grid is very clearly required to manage this kind of charging. For example, if there are all the cars that are there in the country, if half of them get converted to electric, you would have concerns of the capacities and stuff like that. Now, that's where the smart charging comes in. First part. So when I say smart charging, it connects the digital platform and the grid expertise. Put together, I think as a grid owner, things like time of the day charging, smart dynamic charging. We have seen again in UK, we have seen times which are suddenly they announce between 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you charge the car, then your rates have dropped. So I think those are the kind of ways that you balance the grid, and this is where I'm connecting the expertise on the grid, which we have, which is something which we are credited with very clearly, as well as the technology element which is sitting on top of the charger, which is the digital platform. And this is something which is going to be the differentiation between what we have and what anybody else can possibly offer.
Just one thing before what I want to touch upon, but there are still some, I would say, societal or structural challenges in the fact that not everyone today, especially in older buildings or accommodation, have access to a plug point. They may have the car, they may, and as cars become cheaper and more affordable, these people, may not really have the luxury of having a garage or a wall box at home and one at the office as well. So then, how do you compensate for that? Is that more fast charging network within the city? So then people just use it like they go to a pump. It takes a bit longer and then charge their EV. Do you think this is also a challenge?
Yeah. So, but I think so. We are putting up a combination of fast DC chargers as well as wall box chargers, AC types, starting from 7.5, 11 to 25, 50. But I think the core thing is that this is a phenomena which is largely restricted to large urban clusters. I don't have a parking space dedicated for myself is something which is a phenomena in large urban clusters like Mumbai, Delhi, or kinds. May not be a problem elsewhere. We are doing home charging for cars like Nexon, and we are very surprised to find that when we go into the interiors, slightly more interiors, they have very clearly earmarked space, not designated space, I would say, but they have got a norm space. So this is point number one. Point number two, very clearly, I think, is when we talk about the public charging, uh, largely it is to do with opportunity charging, and people do not expect that you go to a petrol pump to charge, or you get it at 150 or 50 kilowatt. There is a slight mindset change that would be essential in a way, and this mindset is not very easy to change. It's a 100-year-old mindset which comes with a petrol and diesel vehicle, but this is something that is slowly, people like you can help us in sort of sharing this with the rest of the mobility space, to say that uh, petrol pumps are largely a centralized fueling infrastructure, whereas electric mobility is meant to be a fragmented or a
Right.
decentralized infrastructure. So you start from home fully charged, you go to your office, top it up, you go to from your office to, you want to go to, let's say from Delhi to Chandigarh, you do top ups, small top ups, and you really don't have to wait. You go to a petrol pump to charge 5 minutes there, and then you come back. It takes, even if it's the closest petrol pump, it takes 15 to 20 minutes. We don't expect that in the case of electric vehicles. You continue to do what you do otherwise: shopping, coffee, home, sleep, and office. The car continues to charge itself. It's almost like your own petrol pump, which is lying next to your car. And that's the mindset change that we are trying to evangelize, and seeking the help from senior journalists like you.
Right. And, just a couple of, I mean, the other question, let's say range anxiety. I mean, that's still very real. I mean, I've experienced it. How long do you think, this is going to take, it's going to take to overcome? Obviously, it'll be a fundamental thing of the actual range of the vehicle, the charging time of the vehicle, and of course, the infrastructure. I think they all have to come together. And just from Tata Power's perspective, what are you doing to kind of ensuring that range becomes less of a worry? Obviously, you had touched upon it. One is the fast DC charging and the network. But is there anything beyond that?
Okay, I think that's a very interesting piece. So there have been studies across the world. We realize that whenever there is a charger that comes up, public charger that comes up next to your office, home, or workplace, the tendency to consider an electric car goes up. And when you see more such chargers, your range anxiety in that sense comes down. So, uh, very clearly, if there is a charger that is installed and is visible, that is the time that the ecosystem around that starts considering the car and feels a good amount of comfort. Now I've got a charger, and now my range anxiety is in a way sorted. And the second part is, we are doing a lot. I mentioned to you about the digital platform that we are creating. We are investing a huge amount of money in putting that platform together, which is actually cutting edge platform, which possibly is going to be the best in the world, not just in India. But that platform very clearly, uh, for the customer, it's simply an app. You will be seeing a number of dots on the map, and location. You just choose your
Charging
location,
station.
and you see so many number of dots. That gives you a good amount of comfort that there are so many chargers around. It's just possibly 15 minutes away or 2 minutes away, and the very fact that we want to sort of say this loudly to customers, and through our social media channels, through our promotion channels, that look, there is a new charger at Ahmednagar. Look, there is a new charger at Chandigarh. Look, there is a new charger at Bangalore, or some such things. That will help a lot in alleviating the range anxiety. Apart from the cars that come, which does eliminate range anxiety. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. In fact, it's such a psychological thing, and I think that's a very interesting point you raised, that having a lot many more chargers visible, obviously, it gives you a more sense of security and confidence. Absolutely right, because when I drove long distance, just the stress of knowing that the only charger I had was at home about 280 kilometers away was definitely stressful. But it's been a great discussion, Sandeep. But finally, the last question I want to ask before we wind up is that, what's the future? I mean, looking at a 10-year horizon, I know things are evolving fast, and in COVID times, it's hard to predict what's going to happen next week. But, just looking a decade ahead, what does Tata Power see for EVs? What do you think the market will be? How many vehicles, how many cars are going to be there on the road? Right now, we are, to be honest, we are behind in the race. Do you think we'll be catching up? What needs to be done to really kind of, let's say, for the EV market to really accelerate?
Tracking this domain very clearly. I think there are two or three scenarios that emerge, and I will just take you back in this 45 days of the 2021. You are seeing the kind of announcement that are happening, and the excitement that is there. There is a narrative which is dominating the media space as well. So we expect a lot of vehicles to come in the current year and even in the next. Uh, Now, to talk about the policy framework, I think when we talk about the government policy, the push is very, very strongly there. And we believe that, and that's what the government also believes, that we will possibly be leapfrogging into the new technologies, whether it is charging technologies, whether it is the vehicle technologies. So, quite like a lot of other things, we will possibly get the benefit of the latest before we actually go the step direction. If you look at the government, the way they are doing it, and if you were to believe what they said, I think we will have about 30% of the EVs being there in the country by about 2025, 2024 even. Talk to the consultants. There are some people who think that we are being far more conservative, and some people feel that they are being far more aggressive. I think the truth lies somewhere in between. And you very correctly mentioned that 10,000 to 15,000 vehicles is what we would expect this year, and next year is what I think is a is I would say a J curve, beginning of the J curve, when we will have slightly lower priced vehicles as well as on the top end vehicles like iPace and stuff, which makes it very aspirational. When you have a high performance vehicle like an iPace, it's very aspiring to consider buying an electric vehicle. All that, the silence, the pickup, the award that this car has got. I think that's the it will all help in this ecosystem. By the way, numbers about 10 years down the line, I think it's EVs all the way.
Well, on that very optimistic note, and with the launch of the iPace, which, as you said, it kind of drives the aspiration for EVs. It makes EVs exciting, and the affordability, and like you're saying, 10 years EVs all the way. Well, on that very optimistic note, just want to say thanks so much for talking to me. It's been a very, very enlightening discussion, and wish you all the best. And stay charged.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.